Welcome to the Anxiety Connection. If you've ever struggled with anxiety and are ready to finally get some answers, you've come to the right place. Hi, my name is Wendy Leeds, and I've suffered with anxiety my entire life. Thankfully, I'm also a psychotherapist, and over the years, I've learned a lot about anxiety, where it comes from, and how to manage it. That's what this podcast is all about. So, let's grab a cup of tea and talk about it. Today, I'm going to share an idea about anxiety I think is going to be a real game changer for you. I'm going to talk about getting to the roots of your anxiety and then finding the courage and the strength to face your fears head on. I'm going to break anxiety down for you into what I believe are its two parts: what you fear and how you deal with that fear. I know that sounds simple, but for me, this is the easiest, best way I know to get to the heart of our fear and to start the healing process from the inside out. So let's begin by looking at what I think are the two basic parts of anxiety. Part one is all the scary thoughts you have about what might happen in the future, all the what ifs and all those visions of possible disasters, catastrophic tragedies, and all the terrible things that might lie ahead. And how do I know? Been there, done that, have the t-shirt. And if you have anxiety, you know what I'm talking about. And in some ways, the truth is this worry about the future is helpful. It's what makes us buy the fire extinguisher for the kitchen and bring the car in for service before the brakes fail. And so in truth, it does serve a useful function occasionally. But for the most part, let's agree, anxiety solves nothing. Otherwise, you can't worry hard or long enough to prevent bad things from happening. I know, I've tried. Worrying does not change the future, and it robs you of your life in the moment. It takes away our sense of peace and comfort and joy. You miss your life if you worry and have anxiety. Here's the truth, my anxious fellow friends. We don't have control of things that are going to happen to us. COVID, who saw that coming? Cancer, accidents, all of these things are beyond our control. And that makes us feel vulnerable. And that vulnerability makes us worry. And when we focus on all those scary possibilities, that makes us anxious. But here comes the good news. We can absolutely control the other part of that fear equation. And that comes back to how we believe we're going to be able to handle what life throws at us. We can control our thoughts and beliefs about who we are and how we're going to show up if and when life blindsides us. Are we going to run and hide, give up? Have we learned or decided that we're somehow too broken, too weak to cope? Maybe we think or say to ourselves, boy or girl, you can't do this. Somebody else is going to have to take care of this. I can't. Or if that terrible thing ever happened to me, it would destroy me. Or I know. I'm not going to be able to handle that. I'm not going to even try. I'm going back to bed. If you have any of these thoughts, or if you believe any of those things about yourself, that's what keeps you anxious. Think about this. If we could change that kind of negative thinking about ourselves, if we could convince ourselves that we might be able to handle what happens to us, we wouldn't have to feel so helpless or afraid all the time. And if we were confident we could handle everything that happens to us, what would be left to worry about? So let me ask you, do you trust yourself to handle anything life throws at you? If not, why not? Let's take a look at that why not. And let's start by going back to your childhood, at what you might have learned or been taught about not trusting yourself. As a friend of mine, Susan Jakowski, says so wisely, how you grow up impacts how you show up. So true. What you learned as a child might still be running your life today. And I'm going to give you 3 examples. And I hope you're thinking about your life as I share this little story about how 3 little girls, Annie, Becky, and Carol, were treated when they were faced with a fearful situation, and what they learned about themselves from their caregivers or their parents. So as I'm talking, think back to your childhood and the messages you got from the people around you about who you are and how you fit in the world. And let me say before I start, when I say parents, I'm talking about really any important adult authority in your life. I'm just sharing a made-up example, but I know in real life, families are complicated and messy and complex. So when I say parents, you just substitute in whatever's right for you. Grandparent, single parent, aunt, foster parent, teacher, authority figure. Just this exercise is for you. Make it your own. All right, let's start with Annie. Annie's parents are both really busy with work. They don't have time for Annie. One afternoon, Annie's playing alone in the basement when she notices a big black spider crawling up the wall. Annie screams in fear and runs upstairs to tell her parents. Her father says, "Annie, I'm busy. Leave me alone." Her mother says, "Annie, you're overreacting. There's nothing to be afraid of. And for heaven's sakes, stop interrupting when I'm working." Okay, Annie goes back to the basement to play as far away from the spider as possible. She's still afraid, and notice, she's still alone. No one came to help Annie. So, what's Annie learned? She's learned that what she experienced and what she felt wasn't valid, and it certainly wasn't important. Her parents blew her off. She's learned that her needs and her fears are just foolish. She can't trust her judgment. She's a silly, ineffectual little girl who needs to look outside herself for answers rather than to trust her own instincts. And she's learned she can't trust herself to make her own decisions or take care of herself. Now, maybe this happened to Annie just once, but let's just say Annie's terrified of spiders. And maybe what happened was so scary and so memorable, it left a lasting impression. This was a defining moment in her childhood. And from it, she took the idea that she's not capable or worthy, because that got hardwired in her brain. And let me explain. We have a saying in psychology: what fires together wires together, which simply means events that cause us overwhelming emotion, panic, fear, pain, even joy. Those events tend to get hardwired right into our brain. I mean, they're really in there. And that's what happens in trauma. It's the emotion around the event that keeps us stuck in our fear. Maybe something like that happened to you. Maybe there was a traumatic event in your childhood that hardwired right into your brain the idea that you can't trust your judgment, or you're not worthy of safety and comfort, or really anything of value. Maybe in your life, this event like Annie's happened once and the trauma is still with you because it got hardwired there. Or maybe this kind of thing, this being ignored, happened over and over. And eventually you, like Annie, realized, why bother? My efforts aren't going to produce any results. And you just gave up on getting help. Or maybe you gave up on trusting yourself. Does any of this sound familiar? Well, maybe your family looked more like Becky's. Becky's parents are angry most of the time, either at each other or at her. They're just angry. And one afternoon, Becky's in the basement. She sees the spiders, runs to her parents. So it's the same event as what happened to Annie. But this time there's a different reaction from those adults. This time, Becky's mother yells at her. What's wrong with you? You need to stop whining. You just need to grow up. Her father says, you want something to be afraid of? I'll give you something to be afraid of. Becky goes back downstairs to the basement and sits cowering in the corner alone. She now knows her needs, her feelings, her thoughts are actually dangerous and can get her into some real trouble. She's also learned that she's not okay, that there's something wrong with her. I don't know about you, but my heart breaks for Becky. Or maybe you're recognizing some of your own pain. Maybe you're starting to see how and where your lack of self-trust and self-worth might have come from. Thinking back to your childhood, what were the messages you got from parents, family, friends, or other authorities in your life? And all right, let me stop here. This is not about blaming anyone. This is about you and finding those places where you were hurt or felt broken, the times you were given misinformation and lies about your wonderful self. This is about looking to your past and using that information to help you move into a more peaceful future. So we're not blaming, just gathering information. Okay, now, our third example, Carol's parents are both present for her and make her a priority in their lives. Not perfect, but they show up. One afternoon, Carol's in the basement, sees the spider, runs up to her parents. Her mom puts an arm around Carol, and her father gets rid of the spider. Do you feel the difference? Carol's learned it's okay to ask for help. And more importantly, Carol's learned it's okay to be Carol. And let me just say here, it's okay to be you too. What happened back then, the things you learned about yourself were so powerful that you may still believe them. But seriously, are they true? I don't think so. Look, I know, and I think you deep down know too, that you did not deserve to be ignored, bullied, demeaned, or abused in any way. And let me say, I think what happened to Annie and Becky was abuse. Abuse is not just physical. I know in my experience, even though you can't see the scars of the things that happened back then, these emotional wounds, I think, cause more damage and more suffering than a physical injury. And worse, we tend to shrug off or try to ignore these emotional, painful wounds because we're embarrassed, ashamed, or we believe somehow we're weak and bad because this happened to us. We believe somehow it's our fault that the people we loved and trusted hurt us. We believe there's something wrong with us. But if you hear nothing else today, please hear this, please. I think what you deserved then and now was and is to be heard, to be hugged, to be loved, and be protected. And I deeply believe all those negative things you were told back then had nothing to do with who you are then and who you are now. They had everything to do with those caregivers and authority figures, those parents, the clergy, the teachers. This is about their anger, their words, their neglect. All of those were about the hurt, the anger, and pain that is inside them. What happened to you really isn't about you. It's about who they were and what they believed about the world. And let me say again, what they told you, what they did to you, had nothing to do with the good, lovely person you were and are inside. This abuse is on them, not you. Feel free to let it go. Now let's remember also that was then and this is now. Today, you're not a helpless little child. You're a grown-up. You're in charge of your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. And you have so much more control over your life than you did back then. You get to choose what you think. And here comes the magic. Get ready. You can choose to think differently about who you are. You can start telling yourself the truth about who you really are, the powerful, brilliant person we both know exists under all that self-doubt and worry. It's time you got in touch with the real you and to let that person shine. It's time you realized you're important. Now you're maybe thinking, Wendy, you lost your mind. Nothing important about me. I'm average. I blend in. No one notices me. Wendy, you have no idea who I really am, but I argue that I do know you. I know you're special. I know you have amazing gifts and talents that set you apart from everyone else. I know it, and so do you. And I know if I ask the people who know and love you, I bet they're going to agree with me. It's time to acknowledge those strengths, that fabulously unique things about you, the things you can count on to see you through the bad times, the courage. Are you wise? Are you compassionate? Can you be trusted to show up for everyone else? This is about showing up for you. Take a minute and think about all your successes. What have you done well? The times you faced your fear, the times you helped someone else, you made a difference in the world, the time you stood up for yourself. I promise you, once you start to look for your positive qualities, you will remember how many fabulous things there are about you. You just have to remember that those things are there. We all spend so much time focusing on the negative. Time to stop focusing on what you can't do and focus fully on what you can do. Celebrate those strengths, talk about them, love them, polish them up, and use them to support yourself today and in all the days to come. Because here's the deal. There's only one person on the planet you're going to have a relationship with for every single moment, all the rest of your life, and that's you. And you get to decide what that relationship looks like. And you can decide in this moment to make that a relationship of love and respect. You can decide you're going to treat yourself with the same courtesy, compassion, and kindness you treat your very best friend or a beloved partner, because you deserve it. And more importantly, that's the way we build trust with ourselves. It's exactly the same way we build trust with everyone else in our lives. So you're thinking, well, how the heck do I do that? Here are 4 things you can do right now to start building trust with yourself. First of all, keep your promises to you. If you made an appointment with your dentist or your lawyer, I bet you show up. Why? Well, first of all, you're paying for it, but also because you're placing value on that person's time. I'm asking you to start valuing your time the same way. Think about it. If someone else didn't show up for an appointment with you and they did it all the time, would you trust them? I don't think so. And if you consistently didn't show up for your dental appointments, is your dentist going to trust you? Absolutely not. But how often do you promise yourself you're going to the gym or you're going to look for a new job and you just ignore that as if it doesn't matter and you don't matter? Listen, no one can trust someone who doesn't keep their word, including you. Be trustworthy, but honor your word to yourself first. You deserve it. Secondly, speak to and treat yourself kindly. No one trusts anyone who yells at them all the time. You certainly wouldn't trust someone who threatened or bullied or called you names. So stop allowing that from yourself. From now on, resolve to only accept from yourself the same kind of supportive, loving language you demand from anyone else. Period. End of sentence. Be nice to you. Thirdly, take care of your physical needs. When you ignore your body's needs, you're telling yourself, hey, I don't matter. And I believe ignoring needs like going without sleep, skipping meals, overeating, undereating, overexercising, drinking too much, all of these things that can cause physical harm in the moment and do long-term damage to your body. All of these things are really a form of self-abuse. I bet you wouldn't trust anyone else who abused you. It's time to stop allowing that from yourself. No more putting off your needs. It's time to step up and honor yourself by taking care of your body and your spirit, because you deserve to feel good and to be as healthy as possible. Finally, step outside your comfort zone once in a while. Someone smart once said, everything you want is waiting for you on the other side of that comfort zone. And I believe that's true. The trick is, and here's the trick, to get yourself to take that first step. That's the hard part. Here's how. Begin by reminding yourself of the strengths and talents and all those wonderful things you've done in the past, all these things we've been talking about. And remind yourself that you can rely on yourself. This is the beginning of relying on yourself, that you're going to be able to handle whatever happens to you. Then, as you take that first tiny, tiny, tiny step, continue to speak to yourself kindly and gently, and know that with each little step outside your usual routine, you're proving to yourself that you can trust yourself to create that amazing life you've always wanted. Starts with that first step. Let me end by sharing this wonderful, wonderful saying about self-trust by Charlie Wardle. I just love this. And for me, it's the perfect image of what I've been talking about today. Here's the quote. A bird sitting on a tree is never afraid of the branch breaking because her trust is not on the branch, but on its own wings. Always believe in yourself. So, my anxious friend, believe in those gorgeous wings of yours and let them take you fearlessly into your future. If what I talked about today resonated with you and you want to read more about this, please know I have so much more information about building self-trust in my book, Common Sense, which is coming out soon. I can't wait. If you want to make sure you get your copy, you can go right to my website, wendyleeds.com, get on the wait list. I want to make sure everybody gets a copy if they want it. And if my book is already out, lucky you, you can get your copy today, no waiting. And all of this will be in the show notes. As always, thank you so much for joining us today here at the Anxiety Connection. If you'd like to be a part of things, please subscribe. And until we're together again, I wish you peace, joy, and love.